Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. President Bukele from El Salvador is outright refusing to return Abrego Garcia, who was in an administrative era deported and sent to the terrorism prison of El Salvador. Even though we see that President Trump and him are meeting at the White House, and this is today, he has outright refused to return Kilmore Abrego Garcia, who is a Maryland resident that was wrongfully deported by the U.S. authorities, who have no evidence that he is part of a gang or even gang affiliated. President Bukele calls the request preposterous and says even if he wanted to, he doesn't have the legal authority. Garcia now rotting in a Salvadorian mega prison, and the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling completely ignored. So our American troops are going to be on the front door of El Salvador because Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a legal resident of the United States. Does he fall within the jurisdiction and afforded the same rights and protections of any American citizen because he is a legal resident of our country? So we're going to go and get him, or we're going to put pressure on the El Salvadorian government because the president is here with our president. They're having a good time. They're chit-chatting. They're drinking buddies. But again, we have a man with no evidence that was sent and deported to El Salvadorian prison. And why is this important? Because you guys may have friends, colleagues, family members that are not American citizens but are in America legally. And this can happen to anyone. So the government, both governments rather, should do the right thing according to the law and do the right thing by Kilmar and bringing him back to the United States of America. And whatever legal battle you guys want to get into and strip him and revoke him of his legal residency, then you guys go ahead and do that. But right now you have an innocent man in one of the worst prisons in the world who is not legally supposed to be there. And then you have the president here stating, oh, that's preposterous. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't. Why couldn't you, the president? I know you have pardon powers in order to pardon him if that's some red bureaucratic tape you have to get through in order to get this man back to where he's supposed to be. My only question is, would the U.S. government act differently if this was an American citizen that was mistakenly deported to El Salvador? Some people may say, oh, that would never happen. I'm just saying accidents happen because this was an accident. This was an administrative error. And then they try to allude to the fact that, oh, well, even though this was an error, they say, yeah, it was an error. But now that we've done some research and, he has some gang affiliations, then prove it. And that's what a lot of people have been saying for quite some time, dealing with certain demographics of people. You are guilty until proven innocent versus U.S. law states that you are innocent until proven guilty. So prove him guilty while he's here in the United States of America. Not deporting him, even though he's a legal resident. You see, white supremacy takes both sides of the argument. You can be right, but they'll say that you're wrong. And then you have a lot of people come out from the public, because we all know that if you are wrong, if you are guilty in the court of public opinion, 90% of the time you're guilty. And the jury will see as such. But this is a very rocky battle here that people are seeming to ignore. I just hope that this doesn't happen to any American citizen and any of their family members who may or may not be legal residents or legal visa card holders. This is where we've come to. And I'm just wondering what his attorney here is about to say. I'm very curious about what his attorney's about to say. So I'm gonna let you guys listen in and give me your thoughts on this.
the district judge issued a further order clarifying her ruling and explaining that the government needs to take all steps reasonable to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States, and that in the meanwhile, it needs to provide the court with information, specifically 3 pieces of information. 1, where is Mr. Abrego Garcia right now? What is his custodial status? 2, what has the government done so far to try to bring him back? There were several days when the court's order was in effect prior to the Supreme Court entering a stay, and now it's been more than 12 hours since the Supreme Court lifted the stay. What has the government done during that time to bring him back? And then 3, what is the government planning to do to carry out the court's order?
So that's the question I have. I wonder if the American government altogether can just ignore the court proceedings or court filings, what the court want the government to do. So we're so adherent law. We got the legislative branch, the executive branch, and judicial branch, and supposedly Supreme Court of the all-powerful. So when the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, comes to a final order and sets forth and give that to the government, I mean, what is the power if it's not being reinforced? So again, I believe that the lawyer had some really good points there, but he should be definitely brought back to the United States of America. Now, if anything, like I stated before, President Bukele of El Salvador said that it's preposterous to ask for Garcia to come back home. It's preposterous that he's still in prison. And it was based off of a mistake. This is ridiculous. And hopefully, I would like to believe, no matter what political party you're a part of, that you see it as the rule of law, that this was done in error. They don't have any evidence to say otherwise, just assumptions. And what if all of us get trumped up on charges based upon assumptions? Oh, I'm walking down the street. Oh, there's a black man. He must got drugs on him. Let's lock him up. They just assumed that I did. No, I'm a law-abiding citizen. Again, maybe it needs to happen to an American citizen for a lot of us to stand 10 toes down on the rule of law here in America. Maybe that's what needs to happen. Now, Trump is again making headlines this time for labeling Russia's latest missile strike on Sunday, a strike that left over 34 Ukrainians dead, as just a mistake. Ukraine isn't having it. President Zelensky called the attack an act of terrorism and condemned Trump's comments as a propaganda echo of Putin. Meanwhile, global powers are wondering whose side America is really on. That's a really good question. This is unfolding like nothing I've ever seen or heard of before. President Trump is basically downplaying this attack as a mistake. 34 people losing their lives is not a mistake. It's definitely not a mistake. And here's what I was really talking about last week is that America, the Trump administration, really just need to take a step back. Just allow the Europeans to handle the European mess that they're all in, okay? You know, you have all these European nations coming to the front, standing up for Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, providing Ukraine with resources. That is absolutely wonderful, and they should. America, we should definitely take a back seat. As a matter of fact, we shouldn't even be in the car at this time. We should be focused on tariffs. We should be focused on our country. We should be focused on America First agenda. We should be focusing on bringing manufacturing, jobs back to America, skills back to America, trades back to America. We should be really focusing on what a lot of people voted for Donald Trump for. And a lot of Americans have voted for when he was stating that he will end this war in a week. I will end this war in a day. The war has not ended, President Trump. And I don't think anybody will look at you sideways if you say, I bit off more than what I can chew. And this is more complex than I thought it would be. So instead of America continue to support of Ukraine, continue in relations with Russia, I'm going to let the European Union, I'm going to let the European nations gather together and negotiate and deal and have talks with Russia in order to ceasefire, the war, to ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. I just think that America needs to take a back seat on all of this. Because again, they're going to hold Trump words to the letter of the law. They're going to scrutinize. They're going to twist. They're going to, and again, they might not even have to twist it. They just take his regular words, okay, and then within context, the narrative and context that they see fit, shape it as if, oh, he's just downplaying it. But again, was it a mistake? See, I like to question the question. Was it a mistake? That's what was stated. But with the European Union, as well as Ukraine, is stating that they feel as though Trump is taking Putin aside. And they don't know whose side America's really on. It's a lot going on in the world right now. And again, when it comes to a lot of these foreign wars, Israel against Hamas, Ukraine against Russia, I think we should be absolutely laser focused on America right now. Now, here's one of these news updates for you guys, because in Pennsylvania, we told you about Josh Shapiro, the governor. There was an attempt on his life and his family. His house was burned to a crisp. And the culprit, Cody, he threw 2 Molotov cocktails inside of his home. And this was all to kill Josh Shapiro. Now, the suspect, he's out of Harrisburg, Maryland. He was allegedly carrying gasoline-filled bottles and a sledgehammer, planning to attack the governor himself. And authorities are calling it a politically motivated act. And the charges are stacking up: terrorism, arson, attempted homicide. Absolutely. I don't care who it is. It could be Greg Abbott. If you're going to attack a sitting official, you know what? Scratch it. If you're going to attack anyone and not trying to handle something civil, take someone to court, go to a town hall, speak your mind, then you should be held to the full letter of the law. And you should be prosecuted if proven guilty in a court of law of the charges, and stay, a very long time in prison. We should not have attack on American citizens. We should not have attack on U.S. officials. Now, of course, because in the positions that they are in, they're public figures. I believe that imposing certain charges and or prison time is going to be more lengthy because of their status, as it should be. Okay, because again, a lot of these government officials, they're risking their lives just being in place, because you would like to believe that when these officials are elected in by their constituents, that they're taking the majority of the constituents and adhering to legislation they want to be passed. What that means is everyone is not going to be pleased with legislation being passed. So you're going to have a couple of outliers that are going to be infuriated and mad and upset because their side didn't win, or the people who had their same perspective and views wasn't enough of the total voting body in order to elect their guy or their woman in office. But that is no right. It gives you no justice to go in an attempted assassination of a sitting governor, let alone a retired governor. So again, I hope their law prevails in this case as well. Now, despite a noticeable drop in illegal immigrant crossing, the Biden administration has quietly approved, I don't know how they did this, deploying U.S. troops to the southern border. My apologies, the Trump administration, not the Biden administration. They approved sending troops to the southern border. Now, officially, it's about supporting enforcement, but those critics, and they're usually coming from the left when it comes to the south of the border, but they argue about the optics and political leverage. Now, could this be laying the groundwork for a new wave of immigration policies, or is it just a window dressing before the 2026 election season? This story has a lot to entail because they deploy, soldiers. I don't know if these are National Guard troops. Okay. I don't know if these are federal troops, but it states here that it's a quiet afternoon in a town of roughly 6,000 along the southwest border where the Trump administration has deployed some 10,000 active duty soldiers. Active duty soldiers, a move that's part of the president's campaign promise to stop irregular crossing into the United States. Last but not least, I feel like they're basically turning the place into a military zone or a wannabe conflict zone when in reality, it isn't, said local resident Anibal Galindo of the deployment. So again, there's a lot going on when it comes to the border altogether. There's just a lot going on when it comes to the border. But again, he's making valid attempts to stop and slow down illegal immigrants from crossing into our country instead of coming through the right way. So again, I agree with this. This is a good stance. I don't see why any American citizen would be against this. Doesn't matter your political affiliation. Why would any American citizens be against troops at the border securing our border so people do not enter illegally? Last but not least, I want to get your comments here and your thoughts about the statements that are going to be made in this next video clip. I believe is intriguing. Again, there's comments being made that some may not agree with or may not be knowledgeable of. I tell you, any claims made in this next video clip, I encourage you to do your own research so you can verify what this young lady is referring to and what she's talking about altogether. So please listen in.
Obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word that the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans. Words like plague and colonizer, maybe, but not blessed. And the cell phone in my hand came from China. So I don't know if you're referencing Steve Jobs or Martin Cooper or the Finnish inventor who created the first pocket-sized telecommunication device in 1917, and you probably don't know either because your education system has left you terribly ignorant and without the critical thinking skills necessary to effectively gather information. Because you believe that most great inventions can be attributed to one white person, as opposed to recognizing that the patent system is how white people colonize intellectual property. We would not have cell phones if it wasn't for the creation of the gamma electrical cell by Black inventor Henry T. Sampson. And most of our cell phones would not have microphones in them if it wasn't for the particular microphone that was created by Black inventor James Edward West. The creation of the first digital network, 1G, was launched in Japan, and then Black electrical engineer Jesse Russell pioneered the creation of 2G, which launched in Finland first. 3G launched in Japan, 4G launched in Norway, 5G launched in South Korea, and 30% of the world's cell phones are manufactured in China. Because we of the global majority recognize that collective humanity has the ingenuity and creativity of one another to thank, whereas a lot of European Americans are laboring under the delusion that the rest of us have white people to thank. And it's this narcissistic ignorance that causes people like you to do embarrassing things, like leaving comments about Europeans and cell phones on a video about systemic anti-Black racism in the United States. And while that could be written off as a comedic and senile non sequitur, we recognize it as a desperate attempt to center yourself in a conversation that has nothing to do with you. The irony being that white people like to say not all white people and they shouldn't be held accountable for the misdeeds of their ancestors, yet they want to be associated with the greatness of the things that they think they invented.